When my grandfather died, I expected to inherit old watches, dusty furniture, maybe a little money hidden in some forgotten bank account. What I didn't expect was 1,300 acres of land, sitting just outside one of the fastest-growing suburban developments in the state. The property had been in our family since the 1940s. Back then, it was farmland. Over the decades, developers slowly built neighborhoods around it, carving out cul-de-sacs, golf courses, and artificial lakes. But there was one detail almost nobody paid attention to: the entire luxury HOA community. Every clubhouse, tennis court, private park, security gate, and even half the roads had been built on leased land owned by my grandfather. And now that land belonged to me. I first realized how valuable it was when I found a thick binder in my grandfather's study labeled Cedar Hollow Lease Agreement. Inside was a contract signed in 1987 between him and the original developers. The deal allowed the HOA to use the land for 99 years. But the rent adjustment clause could be renegotiated every 10 years. The current rate, $42,000 a year, for 1,300 acres, in a neighborhood where the average home sold for over $1.8 million. I honestly thought there had to be some mistake. A single house in that community paid more in annual property taxes than the HOA paid my grandfather for the entire land lease. So I hired attorneys. 3 different firms reviewed the agreement. Every single one said the same thing: the contract is airtight. You can legally raise the rent at the next adjustment period. And that adjustment period was in 3 weeks. At first, I considered being reasonable. Maybe doubling the lease payment, maybe tripling it. But then, I attended my first HOA meeting. That changed everything. The residents treated staff horribly. They mocked gardeners in front of their kids. They fined homeowners for having incorrect shades of beige on their fences. One elderly woman was publicly humiliated because her grandson's wheelchair ramp hurt community aesthetics. Then the HOA president stood up and bragged about suing a retired couple over holiday decorations. The room applauded. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty. 3 weeks later, every homeowner in Cedar Hollow opened the same certified letter. Effective immediately, the annual land lease payment would increase by 500%. And chaos exploded overnight. The reaction was nuclear. Within 48 hours, my phone had over 600 missed calls. Some homeowners begged me to reconsider. Others threatened lawsuits, political connections, and consequences. One guy left a voicemail saying I'd destroyed the American dream. But the math didn't lie. The HOA had built its entire identity around luxury living while paying practically nothing for the land underneath it. For decades, they had relied on my grandfather being too quiet, too old-fashioned, or too kind to challenge the original agreement. I wasn't. The HOA board immediately held an emergency town hall. Videos leaked online of residents screaming at each other over who was responsible. Some blamed the original developers, others blamed previous board members for never renegotiating a purchase option. Then someone discovered the worst part. The HOA technically didn't own the clubhouse, pools, or recreation fields either. The structures belonged to them, but the ground beneath them remained mine. If the lease defaulted, they could legally lose access to every shared amenity in the neighborhood. Property values started dropping almost instantly. Real estate agents quietly removed phrases like exclusive gated luxury from listings. Buyers got nervous. Banks started asking questions about future HOA stability. Local news stations picked up the story and framed it as the billion-dollar land trap hidden beneath Cedar Hollow. That's when the board tried intimidation. They invited me to a private meeting at the clubhouse. I walked in, expecting negotiations. Instead, it felt like an ambush. 9 board members sat across from me at a polished mahogany table like they were preparing for a criminal trial. Their attorney opened with a threat, claiming they'd bury me in litigation for years. I slid a folder across the table. Inside were environmental reports, zoning maps, and preliminary proposals from developers interested in leasing portions of the land for commercial expansion if the HOA defaulted. A hotel chain wanted the northern section. A medical complex wanted acreage near the entrance road. and a luxury retail developer offered numbers so absurd, I reread them 3 times. The room went silent. For the first time, they realized something terrifying. I didn't need them. The HOA president finally asked the question nobody else wanted to say out loud. What exactly do you want? I looked him dead in the eye. Respect and market value. But by then, it was too late for a peaceful resolution, because homeowners had already turned against each other, and Cedar Hollow was beginning to collapse from the inside. Over the next 6 months, Cedar Hollow transformed from a pristine luxury paradise into a full-scale civil war. The HOA fees skyrocketed almost immediately to cover the new lease payments. Residents who once paid $900 a month suddenly faced bills exceeding $4,000. Some families could absorb the hit. Many couldn't. The people who had stretched their finances just to live in the neighborhood were suddenly trapped. Homes stopped selling. Open houses sat empty for weeks. One mansion owner slashed his asking price by nearly $700,000 and still couldn't find a buyer. Then came the lawsuits. Homeowners sued the HOA board for negligence. The HOA sued the original developers. Former board members blamed previous administrations. Rumors spread daily in neighborhood Facebook groups like wildfire. One post claimed I planned to bulldoze the golf course. Another said I was secretly building casinos. Someone even started a conspiracy theory that my grandfather intentionally designed the lease to punish wealthy people. Ironically, that last part almost sounded true. As the chaos intensified, investigative reporters dug into Cedar Hollow's history. They discovered decades of aggressive HOA behavior, foreclosures over unpaid fines, lawsuits against disabled residents, and thousands spent policing trivial cosmetic violations. Public sympathy evaporated overnight. Then came the breaking point. The HOA missed a lease payment. Technically, I had the right to begin terminating access to community land usage. I didn't even have to evict homeowners. Simply restricting legal access to shared facilities would cripple the entire neighborhood. That possibility terrified everyone. Suddenly, the same board members who threatened me months earlier were asking for mediation. This time, I controlled the room. After weeks of negotiations, we reached a settlement. The HOA would continue leasing the land at a reduced but still dramatically higher rate. In exchange, they agreed to dissolve dozens of abusive bylaws, cap future fines, and completely restructure board elections under independent oversight. The old HOA president resigned 2 days later. Several board members moved out within the year. And me, I turned part of the new revenue into a land conservation trust in my grandfather's name. Parks, public trails, and scholarship programs now exist on acreage that developers once wanted to pave over. Sometimes I wonder what my grandfather would think about everything that happened. But then I remember something he told me as a kid while standing on that same land. Never let arrogant people forget who the ground belongs to.